Hello and welcome to the Idiosyncratic Nightmare Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Bauman, and this is the show where Michael Klein and myself make a portrait of the guest while we're interviewing that guest. This episode, we're talking with a guy who, hands down, is one of my favorite artists out there working in this profession. His name is Mario Robinson, and here's what makes me really love this guy. He is down to get into every deep topic you can think of. If it's about art, if it's about creativity, it involves thought and philosophy and reflection and wisdom. Mario Robinson is your guy. He's been working at the top of his field for decades. And so when I say that we're all in for a treat getting to talk with him, I really, really mean it. Let's jump into the show. Let's talk to Mario Robinson. If you had to answer the question, how is it that you're creative? Right? Like what is the most creative feature of your endeavor? How would you describe that?
That's a good question. On the outside looking
Or
in,
you can reject the premise completely. And I mean that's option number two.
that's option number two.
Just pass.
Yeah, I just pass. I don't want to answer.
Pass. It's like one of those card games. Like you just skip.
Yeah, just that'd be great if you just said flatly, pass. I'll pass on that one. What do you got next?
Yeah. I think art for me, I think it's so personal to each person, and you can only really understand what someone's impetus is when you maybe ask a question like this, because all you're privy to most of the time is like the art on their page, or you see the art in the exhibition or something, but you're like, why do you create this stuff? And for me, art is kind of like the vehicle. Art is like secondary to why I think I'm in this space. Like I think I feel a space that is somewhat necessary. Not me as an individual, but maybe what I represent as far as the dominant culture. And when we drill down and talk about minorities and people that have been able to break through, people that have been able to sustain themselves through our creation, and someone that can possibly, hopefully inspire someone else that's coming behind me. That's what Dean Mitchell did for me. Dean Mitchell is a watercolorist. He paints in acrylic too. When I first saw his work on the cover of the Artist magazine, I think it has to be 2000. It was this African American lady with, it was almost like a smock. She was in a boat. She was fishing in Florida, somewhere in Florida. It looked like murky waters or something like that. And that's something that I never thought I would see. That I don't know why I didn't think I would see it, but I'd never seen it up until that point. So he gave me he kind of pulled the curtain back as far as like possibilities and what I could possibly achieve. I knew I could take it somewhere, but I had to see it. Sometimes you have to envision it. So to answer your question, for me, it's storytelling first. For me, it's what I'm saying first. How I'm composing a scene or putting a person forward, how you see that person or that place. And then I have to get about the business of choosing a medium or level of realism to get your attention, to make you pay attention to some of these things that exist a little bit outside of the expected, things that we expect. Like you walk into a museum, you have certain expectations, right? You walk into a gallery, you have certain expectations, especially when we talk about realism, we start talking about portraiture. So I think I exist. I didn't know I was going to be in the business this long, because you can never predict these things because it's largely not up to you. But thankfully, I'm able to create the work that I create and take up a little bit of space where people can actually, people that maybe hadn't seen themselves taking it to a certain level. Hopefully that's something, if the work has value, if it has validity, I think that's the thing more so than what my realism or my skill says about me. So
Mhm.
I think about storytelling first. I think about so many things, but I think art is kind of like just a vehicle that takes me there, that gets me where I want to go. And
Yeah.
then hopefully it's beautiful. I mean, you do have to think about grabbing someone's attention, holding their attention, and creating something that's hopefully worth someone's attention.
How do you capture somebody's attention, and what is the meaningful part of that for you?
Mm. You have to be careful, like, because I've been painting and drawing for 30 years, and if you're not careful, you can come up with like a device. You can come
Mm.
up with something that's worked so many different times, something that's
Yeah.
so many different times. You can kind of be a repeat offender and not grow as an artist, while the professional side is pushing you to kind of be this particular thing. Me and Ann had conversations about that too a little bit.
Hmm.
As far as like, I think I did a carriage scene or something in Charleston. She was like, "That's not really market," because I'd done these portraits and stuff. And I think as an artist, you really do have to be careful not to be so predictable and
Hmm.
tight fist and trust your own ideas, because I personally am painting for the public. I can sit here and be like, I only paint for myself, but I'm not going to buy any of this stuff. You have to paint for a market, and you have to take chances and know that some stuff that you create isn't going to sell. But largely,
Hmm.
I think if I put my heart and soul into something and not really cheat the system and not phone it in, I think it eventually will have a certain amount of value to someone, because it doesn't
Yeah.
really have any value at all. that's
Yeah.
that's the fun.
Quiet, Mars. That's- Don't
You
take
can
the
edit,
lid off that, Mario. They're gonna find out.
edit.
That-
You can edit it out. You have courage. You can.
yeah.
I mean, a car depreciates as soon as you pull it off the lot. I mean, the value
Yeah.
goes down, down, down.
Mm.
It's a matter of who wants to pay for it, and
Yeah.
you know,
But I think that paint for yourself statement is one of the most misunderstood statements about the whole artist experience. Like I think you hear that when you're young and you think like that's about selfishness and that's about like putting yourself first and like being so strong-minded and stubborn that you never compromise anything. And like those are all like things in a package. It's fine or whatever. But I think that really you know, painting for yourself is the only way that you can reach other people. Like I think that's actually the key. Like I think by painting for other people, what happens actually is that you wind up in this role of like this almost cynical role of like a manipulator. And I don't think that starts out from like a very great place in terms of establishing that connection with an audience. But if you paint something you love, inevitably you'll share some values with the people in your milieu, in your world.
sure. I heard an artist talk about that manipulative part, and he's like, we're all liars, when it comes to like getting these images on like 2D surfaces and trying to turn
Mm,
form and make it like it's three-dimensional. Um,
mm,
and you do really get good at that sleight of hand, and you do have to have a little bit of that. But I think art is so many different things. I had a conversation with an artist the other day, and I was talking about the weight of my older work, and sometimes I do take a break and paint things with like a seagull or something with a
mm,
little bit less of a um, heavy meaning. And I
mm-hmm.
don't I don't criticize people that just paint light stuff and things that are just kind of pretty and decorative, because who am I to say? Um,
Yeah.
each one of us have such a different lived experience, and things that inform us, things that inspire us, things that draw us. And I think that's what makes the landscape so interesting. And I think, me personally, I just can't stay on a constant drip of dopamine where I'm just painting stuff just to paint it. It has,
Mm.
I'm not that interested in art creation to just be able to do that. I have to be putting something forth and pushing a little bit, use your word, a little bit of an agenda behind the bully pulpit to actually try to transport hearts and minds. And a lot of it, the person wouldn't even understand. The person wouldn't even get what I'm trying to say. But I think underneath there's a substrata, there's a current that's moving under there that might draw someone that has that same experience.
When we started doing this show, I initially thought, wow, Michael's a guy that I've been looking at his paintings since before I could paint and going, he's been making bangers. And then like, I know that like back before I was looking at paintings that were bangers, like you were making bangers, right? Like you were like, you're the one generation ahead. And you were like the guy in all the magazines before I even knew you should get into magazines. And I've always found, though, that at the same time, you're someone whose work I've looked at. I've never felt like you lost that center, right? And it's interesting to hear you talk about it, that you're saying, that it's a conscious thing for you, this balance between the commercial premise of the enterprise and your rather authentic artistic self. Is that a dichotomy you think I'm describing accurately, or you look at it a different way?
Well, I just want to keep making bangers. That's all I want to do. That's all I want to do.
That's all I want to. You know what? We're all the same. We're all the same. We all want to make bangers.
I don't want to overcomplicate it and then make it too serious. I think Michael would agree. He's made bangers.
Throughout the philosophy talk, just produce some bangers.
Yeah, you just bring it. I want to create some bangers.
No, but just, all right. Wait, all right. So let me hold on. Before you get to your hands, I got to explain a little bit. Now, I like to use a colloquial language in talking about very serious artistic principles, partly because when I went into school, I feel like there was a purposeful obfuscation of what stuff meant, right? Like you go into school and they're talking about drawing the figure, and they're saying your figure, you're not turning the form. And it's like a very simple thing, and it's a very technical thing. But at the time, it totally mystified me. Like turning the form, like what a Baroque way to talk about making something look round. Like, why are we doing that? But there's like up the level. There's so many different things. We talk about composition. You're talking about esoteric things like finding something that moves you, or finding the key to the picture, the thing that drives the narrative. You want to make something look cool. Find the thing that you think looks cool and emphasize it. That's composition. I mean, that's at least the seed from which composition can grow. So when I say make a banger, all I'm saying is like we're all out there trying to do the same. We want to make paintings that like have an impact, that hit people, that feel good, that communicate and connect us to an audience. So yes, bangers.
That's but I appreciate I appreciate your explanation. Because that brings us to a different place, because the vernacular that you use, it is a very contemporary way of explaining and getting to a shortcut of getting somewhere without having to go through this long, winding road to impress. And I that's why I laugh so much, because I think people in this business, they learn from previous generations. They learn from how other people carry themselves and who they really are when they let their hair down. And I think if we drop some of the falsities and be human beings, and be a little bit more approachable, and make some of the art a little bit more accessible, and the skills, and make it less lofty, I think it would actually increase the interest, like the big tent. I think other people will come into this space from different lifestyles, different cultures, but I do think, the gatekeeping kind of keeps people a little at distance. But to answer your original question, yeah, the magazine thing was kind of pre-social media, and it was like your only real outlet was either going to Barnes and Noble and looking at the artist magazines, or going to the library and looking at what happened over 100 years ago. So my art education was a hybrid of both. Going to the museums and going to the library and learning who these older gentlemen were, who mastered it and aged out. So you have their whole life right ahead of you. from beginning, middle, and end. Or I could go to Barnes and Noble and obviously not buy the magazines, could afford it, but look at Bert Silverman paintings or Max Ginsburg. I would see these repeating figures over and over and over after I came out of college in the 90s. And I would be like, wow, I want to kind of be in one of these magazines. Like these guys, they're in there all the time.
Do you ever feel creatively stagnant? And if you do, if you have experienced this, I'm sure, by the way, I say if you do, every living artist breathing still has done it. Are there external factors that you turn to kind of rekindle that, or to find the next thing that you're going to dive into?
Yeah, if we're being honest, everybody has I wouldn't say a block, but times where it is stagnant. It feels like you're just kind of like in this loop. It happens periodically. I can't say too often, but it happens periodically. And I'll have to do things that are like, that have nothing to do with art, whether it's, getting out of the studio, getting out of that space and just trying to kind of white knuckle it. And I go to the beach, maybe walk around the city, take walks. And then it'll come because I've been doing it for so long until it's like I can see one thing and it'll snap back and I'll get excited. But yeah, there's been times, and I think it's less of ideas. It's less of that. It's for me. It's more of the medium. Like if I've been doing watercolors for like, let's just say, greater part of the year, and I'm just going through it, and I know there's a somewhat predictable end. I'll kind of be a little suspicious, and then I'll just challenge myself with maybe create drawings, or go to oil paint. Something that makes me start thinking again. Something that starts, because you can't get on this run of watercolor, dry brush, and just glazing.
Yeah.
It's like you're doing, it becomes a little boring. You need to change the scenery, and then once
Jolt to the
the
system.
weird part, I didn't know this was gonna happen. So my first few years, maybe the first 10 years, being a young artist, you want to paint everything. And everything you paint is real. And, then I started realizing, man, I've painted so many pictures. I've painted so many beaches, so many people. It's like, I have to really start challenging myself because that stuff is out there now. So many portraits. So it forces you in a weird way to get much more creative about searching for new ways to express yourself. Like in the beginning, you're like a fat kid that loves cake. You're just eating everything. And then you're like, wow, the cavities are starting to build up. You're just starting to, that's something I had to pay attention to. I was like, wow, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to do that again. Like when I first came out, I was getting stereotyped a little bit, because I would do these beautiful church people and Southern people, African Americans, and a few magazines in, a few features in, there was one, I think it was a pastel journal, and the title of it was The Voice of the People. This beautiful African American lady with like a church hat was featured. I started getting stereotyped, like, so that's kind of like that thing where I'm talking about. It's like I painted I'm so in a groove. I'm so comfortable expressing myself in this area, and it feels good. It's wonderful. I'm getting a good response, but I need to switch gears and kind of challenge myself and challenge the viewers, challenge people that follow my work, not just for one single thing. I could do other things and express myself in other ways, and it's easy to probably get pigeonholed, stereotyped if you're allowing it to happen.
Yeah. What is that thing? Because I feel like it's so common, like the "don't put me in a box" thing. Like I think literally every artist who's like done a thing it became popular, was like, wait, that's not me. Like, I need to do another thing now that is the new thing that will define me, that isn't that other thing. What is that?
If
Where
you're,
are we getting this from?
I think I think it's very personal because some people are happy to be stereotyped and just keep doing that thing and keep the money counter going and cash the checks. But I think if you mentioned being a rebel in the beginning. I think if you are rebellious and if you are kind of like the captain of your own ship, you'll be like, yeah, I think you guys need to relax. Like, you don't want people to kind of predict what you're going to do before you do it. I think that's I think that's when you realize, well, I'm not as creative as I thought I was. Like, so I'm always looking at that angle. Like, yeah, I don't want people to be like, wow, he's a one trick pony. He's the voice of the people. Like that. That's that's not what my art is. I think my art is a celebration of life, not just one corner of my existence. I'm so much more than that, you know. And if I had to be known for something, that would be something great to be known for sure. But I can express myself in so many different ways and say so many different things rather than having to use that one device. It's like a cheat code, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a honey. You know, you can keep going to that honey hole and pulling on people's emotions. I don't want to do that. You know, I think that's not honest. That's at all.
Yeah,
So,
but it's fascinating. These themes inevitably come up. You know, I think when you're talking about artists and their life's work and so on, you get these terms like truth and like honesty and things, and you know, they're kind of properties that you only tentatively want to hold on to or talk about, because it starts to you start to have to like make these very clear delineations in terms of like what you believe and so on. And like, I think that, yeah, there's that part of an artist who resists that says like, I want to change and evaluate constantly. I want to always know that there's like a new thing. But would you say, all right, if I bring out the T word, right? We're talking truth,
the truth.
right?
Uh-oh.
What is that? How do
You're
you,
going there.
I'm
Yeah,
going, obviously I'm going there.
you're on a roll
Of
today.
course I'm
You
going
woke
there.
up on my side of the bed.
What would you, is there a role that rather nebulous idea plays in how you look at the work that you're going to make, right? Like, do you think about the truth and honesty of those impulses in that ideation phase? You know what I mean?
Whew.
Or is that
Truth.
too vague? Oh, it's too vague, Mario. I was too vague.
um, no, it's not too vague at all. I think obviously truth is something that that kind of bounces from person to person. But I think I know as a person when I'm creating something, whether I'm doing it for this reason or that reason. Like let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla. Is this for just to make some money, or is this something that even if it doesn't sell, I'm happy to live with it and keep it? I try to be as truthful as I can as to what my impetus, my reason. I think I'm proud to say I kind of approach the work from an honest place. And that's what those early pastels were. Working on something for sometimes 6 months when I couldn't even afford, like, I ate chips for dinner one night. It was like,
Yeah.
and I wrote it in a diary. I always creep people out because I always include some of my diary entries from 1999. And I was talking about going to bed hungry and it was okay. I think it's part of it. And it doesn't get more honest than that. So if I could do it back then, I could certainly approach the work from an honest place now. You know, I'm not going to come this far and then just sell a farm just to be making some money, you know.
Yeah, it's almost like you had this sort of tangible proof at that time, right? Like if you're willing to eat chips for dinner, then like there's not another motivation inside of it. And I mean, by the way, maybe it's even like funny to to bring that up as an idea, like almost because it's a rare industry in which you actually like you're not asking doctors like, are you doctoring for the love of it before you pay? Like I do feel like artists get judged on like a slightly different scale, but maybe there's like a self-consciousness that comes along with the fact that we know that we are monetizing our passion. It's difficult to maintain like both of those. I mean, that's why the bullseye is really small, right? Because if you're just there for the monetization, you're going to be unsatisfied. If you're just there for satisfaction, you're never going to be successful enough to continue making all the work that you want to make. So
Hmm.
you can't cheat, I think, either side of it, right?
Yeah, and I think there's so many traps set for you as an artist if you only are thinking about, you know, making a living. There's commission, there's teaching, there's so many things that are there, you know, for you if you want to play it safe. And it's fine if you want to. It's that's who you are. You have to make a living for yourself. But I think if you're gonna, like I mentioned earlier, if you're gonna sit at that casino table and you're gonna gamble, you have to actually become efficient at taking risks and
Mm.
educated risks, because this business, it's it's tough to navigate. And you know, we were going to go away from the business, but here we find ourselves coming back to the business, because if you were going to draw and paint in peace, you have
Yeah.
to have that fuel. You have to have
Hmm.
your needs taken care of before you can sit in that seat in a warm room or a cool room, depending on the season, and create something without being all crazy and distracted. So
Yeah. I mean,
that.
you get a little bit along in a business and you realize like real leverage is being able to say no. And
Hmm.
as an artist, to be able to say no, you need to have set that professional baseline, you know? Or
Hmm.
you're gonna be dancing to whatever tune they play. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And you know, one satisfying thing to do is look back, you know, like I mentioned, 30 years later, and look at your body of work and look at the things that you've created, knowing that you did pay a lot of sacrifice to create the things that you created, but it's nothing that someone told me to do, it's nothing someone commissioned me to do. There aren't long
Mm.
gaps in my work where I had to be teaching here, here, or here. So for better or for worse, I can look at the work and kind of mark where I was in my life, what was going on. I look at that
Mm.
pastel period. I can look back at the when I started the watercolors, when Anne was like just wanting to just kill me, but taking risk and doing things like that to speed up and work a little bit faster. And um,
Yeah.
that was kind of a marketing decision. That was a professional decision. That was a mixed with a little passion, because I do love the look of watercolor. So you have to be playing jazz. You have to be doing all this on the fly. You have to kind of spin a lot of plates, and make really wise decisions. But you'll be able to look back if you're able to sustain this thing. I think both of you know, if you're able to look back and be proud of what you've created in a life that you've made for yourself, it's totally worth it. Like it's a big gamble, but when you look back and look at your connections, look at the
Hmm.
experiences that you've had, the people that are in your life, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it to go through
Hmm.
it. It's a difficult thing, you know. It really is a difficult thing to sustain. I think it's more difficult in the beginning when no one knows you,
Yeah.
when you're paying for your own watercolors that you can't afford at the beginning, but now not having to, that takes a lot of pressure off of, you know, the
Yeah.
bottom line. So.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Starting that out, it's difficult to see. I mean, to look that far in the future with that much optimism, also because there's so much kind of insecurity that you have when you're starting out as an artist. Not being able to properly kind of benchmark. You're looking at, the paintings in the Met, and you're looking at your little humble little studies that you do in your studio, and going, something doesn't like add up here. But to bet that in 20 years you're going to be able to look back on that moment of like integrity and say, no, I was totally right, that I bet on myself in that moment. It's obviously a very gratifying thing to be able to do.
Oh yeah, yeah. When I had my second auction at Sotheby's, that first one in 2012, and then the second one was last year. Was Bouguereau in his circle, so it was like the gardener, his wife, and then it was Bouguereau, and I think there were three other contemporary artists. I think Cesar Santos was one, but having that work auctioned and hanging next to Bouguereau, you do have that kind of, that's one of those highlights where you're like, wow. If had I not gone through a lot of the things and put myself in some of the positions, wouldn't end up in this particular place. And it's a weird thing because it's like one or two moves, you're not in the place, whether it's the collector or whatever it is, creating the work. And it was one of those difficult pastels that I created in the mid to early 2000s. And you're looking at it on the wall and you're just like, it's all so surreal. You're not having one particular thought, but I think one passing thought that I had was like, wow, this was created in a basement, which was my room studio at the same time.
Yeah.
And the light source was like this window that was this big.
Yeah.
And a snack tray full of pastels. Like, yeah, hanging at Sotheby's next to Bouguereau. It's like, yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, that journey.
You know, because the amount of passion, the amount of energy that I put into that painting spoke to someone who had Bouguereau's and Tatterman in the collection. So it's crazy, but it's not. You know, it's at the point of contact when you're creating something that you have to maybe dream a little bit bigger than people around you and say, you know what, even though I can't see it, this is where faith comes in. Even though I can't see it and it's totally irrational, I'm going to do it if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And if you can do that as much as you can, I think you can kind of bend and meld your reality.
Right.
That's
Yeah, I mean, you have to dream it if you're going to manifest it, right? Like you can't, it doesn't work the other way around.
How else are you going to blow Vicky Wyatt off? Like, you have to be a vision and be like.
Now, up until this point, she didn't know you were totally blowing her off. So now that we've established very clearly that.
I'm not until I text her.
You're in trouble, Mario. You're in trouble.
So, all right, let me ask you a quick question, right? Did you ever do the perfectionist thing? Did you ever have the perfectionist, you know, that virus?
I did. You know, like there would be a running joke because I would draw at the coffee table in high school and like have friends come over sometimes, and they look at it like, "Man, you're still on that eye."
Huh.
It's been
It's been a long time.
That eye needs like another eye, and then it needs a nose. Like you're just still on that eye. And then I realized once I started painting watercolor, it's all out the window. You can have the drawing all you want. You can have it down. Once the water starts moving around, it starts to get crazy. It feels better when it's out of control. It feels better when that chaos is there. It goes back to your question when you're like, you know what? Do you ever get a block or whatever the question was? And it's like, yeah, whenever I'm feeling like whether I'm drawing and it's too tight or I'm painting oil and fixing it, I'll pull up that watercolor palette, squirt some water in there, start throwing it around, and then it just loosens you up. It's just, so you have to be not only loose, but you have to be kind of open to a lot of different possibilities, because the more you're able to allow it to just meander and do its thing, the better it looks. Like if you're trying to hold on too tight watercolor, it'll bite you.
No, I love that idea too, because it's kind of mediums compel you a little bit. Like you're never going to get, like you're talking about watercolor. I feel that way very much about oil paint. You're never going to get as much as you can get out of oil paint if you're careful with it. Like it wants, on a certain level, it wants to get unctuous and kind of chunky, and to go through that phase where all the stuff that oil paint can do starts to kind of happen. And then you try your best to pull it together so it becomes this beautiful representational thing. But mediums can like kind of set you free like that.
That's why I like Michael starts. They start out with this kind of average. He's trying to average things, and it's like a big block of messy clay. And you're like, where is he going? Like, I've seen his finish. What is he doing here today?
It's stressful the whole time. It's stressful the whole time.
Really?
Like
really?
driving like
no. There's like, if you look away from him like for a while and you come back to it, you're like, wait a minute. What? Did you pull out another one? Like, it's interesting the way that looseness kind of informs his process. Watching it kind of develop, you're just like, you need that looseness in the beginning to measure. It seems like you're trying to get things.
the way I think about it is, if you're gonna mess up, right, you just might as well mess up and get beyond it. And so the only way to find that if you're not pointing in the right direction is to just put something down. So I think a lot of people wait to put it down, until it's pretty sure or whatever. But for me, I feel like the quicker I can put anything down, then I can try to calculate and say, okay, well, that's maybe too far off in one direction, wrong color, etc., etc. And it's just a process of always correcting the wrong thing. Like literally, like I don't like to talk about right and wrong with art typically, because it gets in muddy waters. But if you're trying to paint your friend and it doesn't look like your friend, then you have to keep adjusting it until you have that feeling. And so it is wrong until a certain point.
I like that word, feeling, until it has that kind of quote unquote vibe to it, where you're like, this is an echo of that face that I'm used to.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at it, and I like this because it's like, if you're doing this in the lines thing, it doesn't have any real life to it. Too stiff. This has an animation to it. I'm looking at it. It has life, and it's definitely the likenesses. They're both.
You see, that's the thing we want to do. Wouldn't make a podcast where you could also focus on us? You know what I mean? It's all these podcasts are so much about the guest. Who cares about the guest? It's obviously about the interviewers.
It's about my drawing.
You're clearly more interesting. You're clearly more interesting.
Oh God, I'm sorry, Mario. I'm sorry. All right, can I go weird? Can I go weird for a minute?
Weirder? Yes.
I want to get very weird. So there's this thing I learned about science fiction, right? I'm a big science fiction fan. Read a lot of it when I was a kid. Read a fair degree of it when I was a kid. I love science fiction movies. And about maybe 5-10 years ago, I heard read someone talking about science fiction movies. And what they said was, if you look at a science fiction movie and you remove all the science stuff, right? So you remove the aliens, or you remove the spaceship, or the whatever antimatter, then what's left is the story, like what the actual story is about. It's about a relationship between a father and his son, or it's about two people who can't like live together, So it kind of, I'm not going to say it ruined. It definitely changed so much the way that I watch science fiction movies, in that, like, I feel like it's a little bit, the curtain has been pulled back. So like I'm always looking past the aliens now and trying to see like what is the only human part of the story inside of this. And naturally, I kind of want to cross genres with that idea. And I've been looking a lot at realism and thinking, what is the science fiction in realism? What is there if you take it away? That's what's left, or so that what is left is the actual content in it. Now, I don't know if this metaphor tracks completely, but I'm just going to toss it out there to the two of you. with realism, if you remove, let's say, the technique and say the training, what does it reveal that's left? Or alternatively, what would you remove to reveal the true content in realism? Because, I won't make a secret about it. I feel like there's a little bit of a content problem in realism. It's just my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Go ahead, Michael. I know Michael wants this one.
Oh,
Go
well,
ahead,
I'm too distracted.
what would you remove?
I'm too distracted. I can't think. No, I
Okay.
agree with Stephen. I think that there is a big kind of disconnect between the activity of painting and what we're actually saying. So there oftentimes one is void. So the activity of painting takes over and you're saying absolutely nothing. And then it can tip the scale to obviously kind of postmodernism, where it's all about only saying something unique, and it's like a pile of shoes in the middle of the room. So I think, realists are so far on the side of just trying to figure out how to paint a good head or something, that they totally forget that someone actually has to look at, this work of art and contemplate it as a work of art, as such, rather than just an academic, as a study.
And I think we're in such an era of, as we should be with all the information, we live in an information age. We're in this era where it's about how are you painting, how are you doing a thing, and using the model as a device, using things just basically as a setup so I can show off my wizardry, my magic. I think the question kind of answers itself. You take the artist and you're like, okay, what is this? What do I like about this artist? And if your takeaway is, man, those brushstrokes or that use of color, and it's like, he's not communicating an idea that jumps out there where you're like, I love what he paints. I love his mind. I love his sensibility. I love that he reaches across the aisle and paints something I didn't know that he actually connected with. He sees a void in the art industry and he's painting something that's not out there. He's filling a void. So I think if you take even the color away from an artist and just put it in black and white and let them have the same image, do I still love artists? And we are in a little bit of a deficit of ideas. I say that all the time. There's so many artists online. Like I sat with an artist a few years ago and just started talking about this, and an artist who's an instructor, a principal instructor at one of these schools was like, yeah, it's just doom scrolling because you're just going down and you're waiting for something to catch your attention, and not just art, because there's so much art out there. You're waiting for something to grab your heartstring and just pull on it and make you stop. So I think that if there's any advice, anything I can maybe put forward, I would just say, like, picture yourself as a novelist, And if I had to spend time with your book, let's just say it's 150 pages, would I want to get to the end? Are you giving me a begin, middle, and end? Or are you giving me a full story? Because we are storytellers. Whether you're telling someone else's story or it's an autobiography, I want to learn something about you. I want to know what you care about, other than pushing colors. You can literally do that blindfolded. I think the real skill is composing something in this very limited space that you have. If someone looks at it, someone sees it, and if there's a spark in them that it's not just intellectual, they have a heartfelt connection to it. I think you've taken it past materials on the shelf or something that's in a store. You have to use that for something bigger than just that, because that'll separate you. The artists I like are less technical than many other artists, because like Kerry James Marshall's the African American artist. He's like set records. He's in every museum. He's set auction records. And people don't know Kerry James Marshall, but if you look at Kerry James Marshall's work, there's a lot of abstraction in it. He uses the black body as a device. It's figurative, but it's really abstract. But what he's saying is an essay and kind of referendum on the America that he grew up in. He's in his 70s, so he's seen a different, but he's blatant. It's right there in your face. So, Stephen, I've heard you ask this question before about style. I want to jump out there.
You want to get weird now. I've inspired you to get weird.
Allow me to get weird. Allow me to get weird.
Yeah.
So I have an opinion on it.
All right.
And I think it's virtually impossible to decipher whether a person has a style or not.
Okay.
Because we're in this age where people are studying with everyone. There's cross-pollination. And I think that a lot of the work, if it's not signed, you wouldn't be able to tell who in the world did it. Because this one looks like that one. This one studied with that one. What do you think? I've heard you talk about this. It's very interesting concept.
Well, so I think style is like massively important. And like we kind of know it is. There's so much. I come from, obviously, I spent maybe 15 years in what I would refer to as kind of the atelier world, right? So people focused a lot on traditional means, working strictly from life and, doing everything kind of by the 19th century book. That's kind of the big idea, or even the 18th century book, depending upon, which school you want to be a part of. And I do feel like what happens is in that closeness, you start to, whether you want to or not, whether you think you're a rebel or a renegade genius, you start to form a kind of groupthink. I'm not criticizing. I'm not saying everybody there that has groupthink is an idiot. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that being a part of a very tightly focused community with core principles that are so clearly expressed like that, inevitably you start to form this collective. Unfortunately, I don't think collectivist art is particularly interesting. The more of a person, a genuine person I'm seeing in the work that they make, the happier I am that we have that unique voice in the world. I'm, for whatever reason, not enchanted at all with the ununique voice, the voice that is like subsumed inside of like a larger sort of communal purpose. And I feel like in some ways, social media also shrinks the world in that way, in that it's even easier to stay inside of your community, right? And stay inside of your bubble and stay in a world where your thoughts about artwork are not challenged, right? You're not forced to look at yourself and what you do critically because everybody around you is supporting you, And it's almost to the extent where I started to realize, like in my life, when I began to feel like I would be ridiculed for an idea, that was probably the good idea. That's what I should be doing. Because everything else I've seen everybody do already, right? Like I've seen everybody do this thing, and I know that if I did it, I would be accepted perfectly into this community. And that would absolutely be nothing to do with what I actually think for myself. Now, I'm not saying that is a paramount concern, that is like far and above more important than anything else. I don't think individuality alone creates an artwork that engages me. But I do feel like you get into this artistic echo chamber, right? Where only the artwork that doesn't challenge you, like is surrounding you, and you're filtering yourself through that, right? I think you need to get out. I think you need to be challenged. I think you need to, frankly, like for me, get away from an atelier for long enough to feel what it was to truly just be inspired by the things that I wanted to make, to find out, I had this moment. I was working on this painting. This is all the way back in Sweden. And Cornelia comes into the studio, my wife, and I say, what do you think? And she goes, the background, it looks kind of unresolved. Like, I don't get it. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. She said, fill it with the joy of painting. And I was like, I have no fucking idea what that is. I don't know what you're talking about. The joy, what do you mean? Like that, I didn't have that notion.
You're like joy.
When I think about my work, when I think about my work right now, I think I'm filling it, every part of it, with things that I love, things that make me genuinely happy, the things that I was dying to see in a painting. unconstrained by how does this fit into the communal philosophy that I'm a part of, you know? So schools have to have a great philosophy. To say that they shouldn't have one would be ridiculous, right? Because to effectively communicate, you need to know what your values are, and good communication is expressing those values. But then as a student, you need to run away. That's my opinion.
Now, a follow-up question really quickly. So you do need a good philosophy, you do need good principles, you do need some basic skills as an artist. But do you think the longer you stay, the more difficult it is to find your voice, to come out of that and start to build on your personal style?
This is challenging because it plays on a trope that a lot of modernists sort of, paint representational artists with, saying that your education has strangled your creativity. And I feel like that's a very problematic connection to be making. I would think about it more like there's like phases, right, in your life that you should be going through. There's seasons almost that you should be going through. When you're in the atelier and you're being educated, you should be all the way in. Don't have one foot on each side of the fence. Be in it. Live that shit and get everything you can get out of it, right? But then wisdom is knowing when the seasons change, and you need to kind of move away from that. So yes, I actually do feel that the longer you stay in that, like anything, we humans, we're so good at adapting to our surroundings, right? It's how we survive. And so staying in a place, staying in that community, I think one of the hardest things is to be fiercely yourself inside of a community and kind of hit that tiny bullseye.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, I think you can't have. I think extremes are that's where I have a problem. Like if you're self-taught, you do need to kind of have a little bit of structure under it with education, and on the other side, I think you do have to pivot out of that and have the courage to start pull up the hood and start tinkering and seeing how much of this is learned behavior and how much of it is actually like instincts, and creating an aesthetic that's really native to me based on what I'm trying to create. And I think that the thing that maybe solves it, gets you out of that groupthink, is what you're creating, not just a head background or just a random nude floating in space. I think the more you actually start to investigate what your body of work is going to consist of, I think that pushes you out there, and not everything's a studio painting. Everything's just still in acid. I think once you start painting nature, that introduces a different part of your palette, or the way you're brushing, or maybe even other mediums. I love oil, but maybe try something other than drawing charcoal and oil paint. And that just gets us further down the road as a people, because I think just kind of digging up the soil and turning it over keeps this thing fresh.
I think there was something Jung said, right? That was the amount of growth that you'll experience is directly proportionate to the amount of discomfort you'll tolerate.
Yeah.
And I feel like for artists, there's an element of that where, I mean, it's so hard to learn how to do this stuff first. That to then learn how to do it and then go, that's not enough. I need to go out and be into even deeper water, trying to be creative, trying to figure out what it is to be a storyteller. I feel that's like incredibly challenging to get the will together to do that,
Yeah. In the military, in the army, we used to have a phrase that says, embrace the suck. And I think that's kind of explanatory. Sometimes waking up at 4:00 in the morning, getting in formation, rucking for 5 hours before you even, are fully awake, is, and the amount of discipline it takes to go through your day and be in bed by 9 o'clock to do it all over again. It's not gonna feel good, but what you get after that basic training, after that 10 weeks, is like, wow, I entered as a civilian and I'm coming out on the other side as a soldier. And it's like, at some point, that civilian part where you have your creature comforts, you might stay up too late, you might party with friends. That all starts to go away in like week 2. And embracing the suck is like something that you really don't like, but it's so good for you. It is so good because it builds a resiliency. And it grows you as a person where sometimes you want to whine and complain. It's like it takes a lot for you to whine and complain. It takes a real bad situation for you as a soldier to be like, okay, now this is uncomfortable. So yeah, being uncomfortable as an artist that's where the good stuff really happens because it does stretch you. And I think the problem is painting is just such a fun activity to do. So if you can get a simple thing that you're drawing and painting, that's kind of like a pacifier. It's enough for some people to be like, at least I'm painting.
Yeah.
So the more uncomfortable yourself as a person that wants to be viable in a community and wants to actually stand out, you're like, yeah, but that's not enough.
Well, all right. I'll say this.
Okay.
This is getting into scandalous territory, but I'll say it anyway. And I'll caveat it. I'll hedge this by saying this was my experience at the time. I'm not a perfect person. I don't have a perfect perception of the world around me. But when I was living in Sweden and moved away from Florence, I was starting to kind of get some of my own legs about creativity. And I feel like I was making pictures that were like they were starting to be like me and kind of interesting. And I look back on them with a lot of affection. And then I moved to New York or to Jersey City, right, to teach at the academy there. And so I got into that kind of New York ecosystem. And I realized really, really fast that you'd be rewarded way more just by being good at something than you would ever be for being creative, like for the storytelling part. Now, this is a microcosm, right? We're talking about that atelier world, that atelier life, the galleries that circle around there. There's a good amount of success that you can experience just by getting really good at the thing. Up into the point where if you did strip away the technique and strip away the really exquisite drawing in detail, there wouldn't be a lot of content, but that wouldn't really matter with respect to how you advance in your career. And I got really depressed. I got really cynical, and I got really good at drawing heads. So I was like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about my story. All I have to do is draw a head really, 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 really well. Now, all right. Let me walk all of this back and say that was a good and productive period in my life, and I grew through doing that, and it's equipped me really well to be where I am now. So I don't regret it, and I'm not blaming the world for it. But it's definitely something I felt at the time, and I remember the quality of it very distinctly.
They fed your addiction. They let you.
Yeah, I think it was very easy to just do the thing well, and you'd be praised to the high heavens for that.
Oof, that's dark,
isn't it? It's very. I feel like it's very dark.
To the slaughter.
What's that?
I said they led you to the slaughter.
Like a sheep led to the slaughter.
Ways. I mean, but you can get really tricked by that feedback. You can get that good feedback going, and you're like, everybody knows I can draw a head. All my workshops sell out. Like everybody's following me on Instagram. It's very easy to like adapt to a small success.
How much of that was your personal choice? Because you're really good at the heads. I'm not gonna lie. How much of that was I see the success in it? I'm growing professionally and stuff like that, but I can't keep doing these heads. Or was it just an artistic journey of getting better at the
I didn't not love heads. You don't get really good at something without actually being passionate about it. You're never going to do it enough or often enough, to get actually that level of proficiency that people are going to look at and go, wow, it's amazing. So you can't choose. I chose heads because I loved heads anyway, but I also knew that a lot of the experimentation I was doing with them, I kind of dropped that because I was like, that's actually just standing in the way of the nicotine hit, right? Of the sugar rush that I get by advancing and being recognized and all that. So it wasn't a totally cold enterprise because I don't think really anybody can do anything almost as a totally cold enterprise. There's something in it has to drive a spark in you if it involves that much work, you know?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I view it, and I'm always very self-critical, and analytical in this way. I'm happy to paint a villainous picture that I was very cynically doing this. I wasn't unhappy, and I don't feel like I was trying to fool anybody, but I felt I had this glimpse of what actually worked, and so I would just do that. And I'm so happy to say, you know, moving away from that, moving to Norway, to the literal middle of nowhere, where nobody comes into my studio, that's probably the place, that and like my nervous breakdown. Those are the two things that have facilitated like my most creative enterprises.
Just threw nervous breakdown in there. That's I'm gonna let you not talk about it. But I think it's kind of like going back to that 90s sensibility, putting the genie back in the bottle and forcing yourself into a little bit of isolation to where you don't have that constant caffeine drip, that dopamine hit, and you can start to really figure things out. And it can be quite liberating because if you stay on that loop, like I said earlier, you do have to check yourself and be like, this kind of feels a little too predictable, too easy to phone in. And I've gotten some pushback. I mean, I remember like around 2015, I started including like some nudes in the work and things that were off of the quote unquote civil rights, African American kind of thing. I remember a couple artists were like, yeah, Mario, you're kind of deviating and that's not your thing. And it's like, and I'm like, what is my thing? Like, I know myself better than I want to say most. Just because the market dictates that have to do something and you're success from it, that's when you take the hard left. That's what made the Helga series by Andrew Wyatt so controversial. Which really, if you look at it, wasn't controversial at all. It's that he had been painting barns and blades of grass and everything for giving people what they wanted for so many years. And 40, 50 years later, decided that he wanted to have something for himself and paint a nude person. Like, that's making the hard left. And actually, that work is so much more intriguing and sought after than the stuff for the break.
Yeah.
The contrary.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mario.
No, that was it. That was it.
It reminds me so much. There's I'm great at remembering quotes, terrible at remembering who said the quote. So my quotes are always like somewhat, I feel like they're a bit satisfying, but highly unsatisfying because I don't know who said them. But there was a musician talking about performance, and she said, people will pay to watch somebody else believe in themselves. Now take that for whatever it is. But if you extrapolate that out into like the art world, I think one of the things that we love to see, that I love to see, that I'm very passionate to see, is like when I know an artist has done that thing, right? You talk about the Helga paintings, like or that series of drawings, paintings. You see that he has taken that hard left, and that's a big part of what you love about it. You love that that he bet on himself, that he not bet on himself. Maybe that's the wrong terminology, but that he was like, this is the thing. Like for me, like I'm doing this so much for myself, and somehow we're gratified from that. Like that's a part of my appreciation. It's not absent in my appreciation of that work. And I look at other artists. Rupert Kaufman comes to mind. Like he's so far out on his own fucking thing, and I'm like, if you ever turn back to the middle, I would hate you for it. Stay out on the edge. Because I get such a charge off of seeing somebody do that,
There's a level of freedom in it. And I think most of us live in this kind of people-pleasing kind of safety zone, live within these parameters where we don't want to disappoint people. We don't want to deviate from what they've defined us to be. So we do the thing until sometimes people do have a midlife crisis or a break or whatever, because they're not living what their truth really is. So I think looking at someone be absolutely free and saying, I really don't care. I think there's a level of inspiration in it, and
Yeah.
times you take that inspiration, you just go for it, or you just kind of live in your box and just complain and be unfulfilled. If I can't do what I want to do and I'm self-employed, like what really is the point? You know?
Yeah. Mario, I'm going to tell you this. In no way am I surprised that this is one of my favorite interviews. I knew that you were going to come here and have like a mic drop moment with us. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Like I said in the beginning, the two of you are two of my favorite people. I'm not just saying it because you're here. There's always something I can take away as a person, not just an artist. Personally, I'm honored and I appreciate you guys for having me on. I do. I appreciate the time.
All right, Mike. Mario.
Thanks, bud.
Take it
Mario. Mario with an E. Have a good rest of the day.
All right, man. I'll talk to you next time.
Yes. All right, Michael. Take care.
Yeah.
That is all for this episode of the Idiosyncratic Nightmare Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Bauman, and on behalf of myself and Michael Klein, I want to say thanks. Thanks for hanging out with us. Thanks for listening to us. Thanks for watching us make these portraits of Mario. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and maybe even leave a comment. Just let us know what you thought about this conversation with Mario. Or if you've maybe got an idea of a guest that would be really great for us to interview and make portraits of, we'd love to hear that too. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.